At 10:50 p.m. outside the Hilton, her lover said, "She told me you'd be asleep." My fiancé stepped back and said, "Guess he woke up." I already had. I used to think people only get that gut feeling in movies, the kind that crawls under your ribs and tells you something's wrong before you even know what it is. That night, it started with a half-asleep text from my fiancée, Harper. She said the charity dinner at the Hilton was running late and that I shouldn't wait up. I stared at that message longer than I should have. There was nothing suspicious about it on the surface, but something in the phrasing, the way she wrote, "Don't wait up," instead of "I'll be home late," felt like a pre-written excuse. I tried to sleep anyway, tossing under the ceiling fan until 10:30 p.m. before finally grabbing my keys. The Hilton was 20 minutes away, near the riverfront, the kind of place where valet attendants wear gloves and the cheapest wine costs more than my car insurance. I told myself I just wanted to surprise her. Maybe bring her a coffee, say hello to her coworkers, play the caring fiancé. But deep down, I was driving to prove something to my own nerves. The parking lot was half empty when I pulled in. The lobby lights glowed warm through the glass, but outside, the air was sharp and quiet. I spotted Harper's blue sedan near the edge of the lot, under a flickering street lamp. I remember that detail because it made everything look staged, like I was walking into someone else's story. A man was leaning against her car. Dark jacket, rolled sleeves, expensive watch flashing under the light. He was too relaxed for a stranger, that kind of posture people have when they've been waiting for someone they know. I slowed my steps, not sure if I should call her name first or just keep walking. Before I could decide, the man looked up, smirked slightly, and said, "She told me you'd be asleep." My mind didn't process it at first. The words landed before I even saw her. But then the passenger door opened, and Harper stepped out, hair down, dress wrinkled like she'd been sitting somewhere for hours, or lying somewhere. She froze when she saw me, the shock quickly replaced by something else. Not guilt, not fear. Annoyance. She said, "Guess he woke up," like it was a punchline between them. I remember my hand tightening around the car key in my pocket. The man, later I'd learn his name was Damon, stood there watching, smirking like he was daring me to react. The silence between us stretched until the valet near the entrance glanced over, sensing tension. Harper moved first, walking around to the driver's side like she wanted to pretend nothing had happened. I stepped forward and asked her if this was a joke, if she wanted to explain what "he told me you'd be asleep" was supposed to mean. She said something about work contacts and "don't make a scene," but her eyes flicked toward Damon every time she spoke. I knew that look, the one that silently checks if the other person is still watching, still protecting the lie. Then it got worse. Her purse slipped from her shoulder as she tried to open the car door. It hit the pavement, spilling everything: wallet, compact, lipstick, a room keycard, and a folded napkin with a phone number and 11 p.m. Suite 60 written on it. The napkin fluttered right to my shoes. Damon stepped forward fast, trying to grab it, but I was faster. I picked it up, looked at the writing, and then at him. He didn't even bother hiding the reaction, just smirked again, that little tilt of the head like a silent, "yeah." Harper hissed his name under her breath, grabbed the purse, and started throwing everything back inside with shaking hands. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. There was no scene left to avoid. The scene was already happening. People near the entrance were watching now. One of the valets walked closer, pretending to check the parked cars, but really keeping an eye on us in case something exploded. Harper suddenly straightened up and snapped that I was acting crazy. Damon laughed softly behind her, said something about letting adults talk, and walked toward the lobby doors. That's when I noticed it, the faint glint of something hanging from her purse strap. A bracelet. Silver, minimal, but I'd seen it before. It wasn't hers. Harper noticed where I was looking and quickly shoved the strap out of sight. She muttered that it was a gift from a coworker. But the charm on it was a set of engraved initials, JB. I didn't know a coworker named JB, but I did have a best friend with those initials, Jarrett. For a moment, I thought maybe my brain was misfiring from adrenaline. I crouched, pretending to fix the fallen napkin again, just to buy a few seconds to breathe. Everything about that moment felt rehearsed. Her excuses, his smirk, the way they seemed to expect me to either shout or leave. But I didn't do either. I just said I'd see her at home and walked back toward my car. She called after me once, sharp, nervous, but I didn't look back. Damon stayed near the door, pretending to check his phone like he was in control. But as I turned the corner toward the exit, I saw something that made him shift uncomfortably. A man in a hotel uniform came out carrying a black leather overnight bag with a Hilton tag. He looked around, spotted Harper, and said something about forgotten luggage from Suite 604. Her eyes widened. She said she didn't know what he was talking about, but the staffer insisted, holding out the tag with her name written on it in the guest section. That's when Damon quietly turned away and walked back inside. I stood in the shadows near my car and watched the whole thing unfold. Harper snatched the bag, muttered something to the staffer, and hurried to her car like she couldn't get away fast enough. She didn't even look around to see if I was still there. When she drove off, I walked back to where they'd been standing and looked down. The napkin was still half torn where I'd held it. The ink from the phone number had smudged from her fingers. It was all so painfully ordinary. No dramatic music, no shouting, no broken glass. Just the quiet hum of the parking lot lights and the faint echo of tires rolling away. On the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying that single line. She told me you'd be asleep. It was the kind of sentence that doesn't just tell you what happened, it tells you what they thought of you while doing it. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. Her car wasn't there. I sat in the living room staring at her framed photo on the shelf, still smiling in some forgotten summer light. My hands shook every time I looked at the bracelet charm in my pocket, the one I'd quietly pulled off her purse when she wasn't looking. JB. Jared. The realization hit, like a slow burn spreading through my chest. If it was true, if my best friend was even remotely involved, then the man at the Hilton wasn't the full story. He was a distraction, a cover for something deeper. I sat there until dawn, staring at that small piece of metal, waiting for the sound of her car in the driveway. But it never came. Instead, at 8:12 a.m., I got a message from Jared. "Hey man, heard you had a rough night. You okay?" I didn't reply, because now I knew. He already knew what happened before I said a word. And that meant Harper wasn't the only one lying to me. By the next morning, the bracelet felt like it was burning a hole through my pocket. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harper's face under the streetlight, not the shock of being caught, but the irritation. The expression of someone inconvenienced, not guilty. When she finally came home around 9, she looked perfectly composed. Same outfit, same makeup, hair freshly brushed like she'd gone somewhere else to clean up. She tossed her keys on the counter and started talking before I could ask a thing. She said her work contact had dropped her off, that she was sorry for how it looked, that she didn't want to embarrass me in front of donors. The words flowed too easily, like lines rehearsed in a car mirror. I listened quietly, my hand still in my hoodie pocket, feeling the edge of that engraved charm. When she paused, I asked her who JB was. The silence that followed was microscopic but loud. She said, "You mean the bracelet? That was from the silent auction. Jared actually bid on it for his girlfriend." The lie came out without hesitation, clean and practiced. But there was one problem. Jared didn't have a girlfriend. He hadn't for almost a year, not since he'd moved downtown and started his new job. I'd helped him move into that apartment. I'd seen him living alone. I didn't call her out. I just nodded and said I had a meeting to get to. She smiled like she'd just passed a test. That afternoon, I drove straight to Jared's office, a tech company on the 5th floor of a glass tower near the waterfront. He greeted me like nothing had happened. The same easy grin, the same clap on the shoulder. We'd been friends since high school. I knew his tells. He had won when he was lying. His left eye twitched almost imperceptibly. And when I asked about the Hilton charity dinner, it twitched. He said he hadn't gone. He'd been working late. Then he caught himself, as if realizing too late that his alibi matched Harper's. I didn't push. I thanked him, said I'd just been confused, and left. But something was wrong beyond the obvious betrayal. It was too organized, too synchronized. Harper's fake explanations, Jared's rehearsed tone, the man at the Hilton, Damon, acting like he had every right to be there. It wasn't impulsive infidelity. It was patterned. That evening, the Hilton called my number. The woman on the line asked if Ms. Harper Lindell was available. I said I was her fiancée and asked what it was about. The woman hesitated, then explained that they'd found a black clutch bag labeled with Harper's name and guest code. Inside, they said, was an ID, a cosmetics bag, and a small electronics case. I told them I'd pick it up. When I arrived, the same valet from the night before recognized me. He gave me a careful nod and led me to the lost and found office behind the reception desk. The attendant handed me a small sealed package. Inside, wrapped in a towel, was a compact black camera, one of those miniature ones influencers use to record vlogs. It still had a memory card inside. For a second, I thought maybe it was part of Harper's charity work. She did social media for a nonprofit, sometimes filmed events. But when I plugged the memory card into my laptop later that night, my stomach turned. The files weren't labeled by date. They were coded. HL_604_1.mp4, HL_604_2.mp4, HL_604_3.mp4. The first one was shaky, showing the Hilton suite. Champagne on ice, petals on the bed, curtains drawn. A man's voice said something about privacy. Then Harper appeared, laughing softly, camera tilted just enough to hide the man's face. The second video was worse. Different angle, same room, her voice whispering something I couldn't hear clearly, then a flash of a wrist. A bracelet. The same one. By the third video, I stopped watching. My chest hurt like someone had punched through it. But as I went to close the folder, I noticed something odd. The third file's reflection in the mirrored background briefly showed two men, one on the bed, the other standing near the balcony door, half turned toward the camera. The second man was wearing a suit with a hotel badge. The badge read, Event Director, D. Carson. Damon. It wasn't just a lover. It was her boss. I stared at the name for a long time. It explained too much. Why she was working late so often, why her promotion had come out of nowhere, why she always seemed anxious when I mentioned visiting her office. The part that broke me wasn't the affair itself. It was realizing that the man from last night wasn't even the secret she was protecting most. He was just one of them. For the next few hours, I sat at my desk trying to breathe through it. My pulse was steady but cold, like I was watching my own life from somewhere far away. I wanted to confront her, scream, do something. But there was a new voice in my head. Calm, deliberate, not angry. It said, you don't get revenge in a storm. You wait for silence. I copied the videos to a private drive and deleted them from the camera. I put everything back into the Hilton bag and locked it in my car trunk. When Harper came home that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She made dinner, asked about my day, told me her boss had approved her next project. Every word was a small, perfect lie. I pretended to believe her. I laughed where I was supposed to, nodded when she talked about timelines and deadlines. She looked relieved, like I'd finally dropped it. But while she was cleaning up the dishes, I checked her phone sitting on the counter. It was open to a text thread with someone named DC. The most recent message read, tomorrow 6 p.m. Same suite. Don't park close this time. I memorized the number, took a photo of the screen, and went upstairs before she noticed. The next day, I called the Hilton pretending to be booking a corporate dinner. I asked which event rooms were available for Saturday. The woman on the phone said most were full, except Suite 604, which was blocked for internal use tomorrow evening. I asked who it was reserved for. She hesitated, then said it was for the Hilton's event director and an external media contractor named Harper Lindell. That confirmed everything. By then, the puzzle was complete. Jared's initials on the bracelet weren't random. They were a message. Jared knew something. Maybe he'd been involved. Maybe he tried to warn me. Either way, Harper had woven her entire life around lies, overlapping them until no one could tell where one ended and another began. But now I had her schedule, her accomplices, her room number, and the one thing she didn't know I had, her recorded proof. I decided I wouldn't just confront her. I'd let her destroy herself. So that evening, I booked the very same suite for the following weekend under my own name. I told the hotel it was for a rehearsal dinner and asked if they could provide catering and champagne service identical to what had been arranged previously. The staff seemed pleased with the business. They even mentioned that Harper and Damon had been wonderful clients. I smiled and said, let's make it even more memorable. When I hung up, I wasn't shaking anymore. There was no rage left. Just focus. The kind that settles in before a decisive move. The next night, the one she thought would be another secret, was going to end differently. And the best part? She wouldn't even realize how deep the trap was until the hotel sent the bill. By Saturday afternoon, my plan was in motion. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Jared. I needed absolute silence. The Hilton staff had reserved the rooftop suite, the same one Harper had used, and when I arrived early, the manager personally showed me the setup. Candlelight dinner, champagne chilling, soft jazz on the playlist. A perfect imitation of what she'd ordered before. What they didn't know was that this wasn't going to be a romantic night. It was going to be an exposure. I asked the staff to attach all future invoices to the same client accounts as before. The manager happily agreed, said it would simplify the billing for Ms. Lindell's corporate package. I nodded. That phrase, simplify the billing, became my weapon. After the staff left, I stood in the center of the suite and looked around. Everything was pristine. The bed perfectly folded, the balcony curtains pulled back to reveal the river view glowing under the dusk light. For a few seconds, I just let the silence settle in. This was the same room she had whispered in, laughed in, cheated in. The same space that now smelled faintly of lavender and guilt. I took out the memory card again and played one of the videos on my phone. It wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I needed to remember the tone of their voices, the rhythm of the lies. It helped me see them not as people I once loved, but as characters in a story that had already written its ending. The first call I made was to Jared. He didn't answer at first, but eventually texted back. What's up? I wrote, need to talk about Harper. Hilton. Now. He replied 5 minutes later. Can't. Busy. Everything okay? That busy told me enough. I knew where he'd be. At 6 p.m., I sat in the Hilton cafe downstairs, pretending to read the newspaper while the elevator cameras recorded people coming in and out. At exactly 6:14, Harper arrived, in the same beige coat she'd worn the night I caught her. She wasn't alone. Damon walked beside her, his hand resting casually on the small of her back. They passed the reception desk laughing, checked in at the counter, and took the elevator up. I waited 5 minutes, then took the next one up myself. When I reached the suite hallway, I could already hear muffled voices from inside. The door was slightly open. I pushed it gently until it clicked. The music played softly from the speaker system, the same playlist I had requested. I stood in the shadowed entryway, invisible behind the partial divider. They were both sitting on the couch. She was holding her wine glass, telling him something about the campaign launch and how no one suspects anything. Damon chuckled, leaning back like a man who thought he'd already won. Then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound was faint, but Harper turned. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Damon frowned and asked what it was. That's when I stepped out. They both froze. For a second, no one spoke. Then Harper's expression flickered between shock and anger. Not fear, just annoyance, the same as that night outside. Damon stood up, ready to say something, but stopped when he saw what I was holding, the black Hilton bag. I placed it on the coffee table and said, "You forgot this." Inside were copies of the videos. A flash drive labeled Suite 604. Damon's jaw tightened. Harper muttered something like, "This isn't what it looks like," but I interrupted calmly, telling her I already knew the details, the nights, the payments, the room number, even the hotel staff's record of who reserved it under whose name. I told them that every charge had been relinked to both of their corporate cards. Harper laughed once, short and forced, thinking I was bluffing. Then I opened my phone and showed her the billing email I'd just received. The Hilton confirmation that the evening's charges will be processed under the existing client record shared by Ms. Lindell and Mr. Carson. The color drained from her face. Damon tried to grab his phone, probably to call the manager, but I said quietly that it wouldn't help. I'd already spoken to corporate. They'd been more than happy to provide invoices for business entertainment to all relevant accounts. It wasn't illegal. It was just ruinous. Damon's company had strict codes about employee conduct and misuse of business expenses. Harper's nonprofit depended entirely on sponsor trust. Once the receipts went public, and I intended them to, both of them would be finished. The moment hung there like a lit fuse. Harper tried to stand, her voice trembling as she said she could explain everything. But when she stepped forward, her purse slipped again, spilling her phone across the floor. The screen lit up. I didn't need to unlock it. A preview of the latest message appeared on top. From Jared. It said, "Tell him it's over. He'll believe you. Damon's not the threat." For a moment, all the air left the room. I bent down, picked up the phone, and looked straight at her. "So this was the plan?" I asked. "Use Damon to distract me while you and Jared cleaned up behind the scenes?" She started shaking her head, but the truth was already spilling through her silence. Damon cursed under his breath and stormed toward the door, realizing he'd been part of a setup too. I let him go. He wasn't the target anymore. When he was gone, Harper dropped onto the couch, covering her face. She muttered that she'd made a mistake, that it wasn't supposed to go this far. I almost laughed. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she'd lost control of the game. I turned toward the balcony, letting the cold wind hit me for a second. The city looked peaceful, boats gliding along the water, distant music from the riverside bars. Down below, life kept moving, unaware that everything up here was crumbling. Before leaving, I placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was a note and the engagement ring she'd left on my dresser that morning, pretending it was for cleaning. The note had one sentence. "Check your email." At 7 p.m., as I walked through the Hilton lobby, I saw two employees huddled behind the counter, whispering. One of them held a printed document with Harper's name highlighted. They didn't notice me. By 7:30, I was home, sitting at my desk again. My email inbox already had 3 new messages. One from Hilton Corporate, one from Damon's HR department, and one from Harper herself. The first was a courtesy notice confirming the shared billing adjustment request had been processed. The second, from Damon's company, was a notice of investigation citing allegations of misconduct. The third, from Harper, simply said, "What did you do?" I didn't reply. Instead, I uploaded the 3 hotel videos to a private cloud folder labeled Documented Evidence, shared the link with an anonymous tip line for her organization's sponsors, and logged out. That night, I didn't sleep either. But this time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like closure tightening around the last open wound. The next morning, the city woke up to a quiet scandal. A leaked email thread between Harper's charity and the Hilton PR department was circulating online. Discussions about improper use of donor funds, and executive entertainment expenses. The photos attached showed the same suite number that appeared in her own Instagram post a week earlier. I didn't leak it. I didn't have to. The Hilton's compliance team did that themselves, probably to save face. By the end of the day, Harper's job was suspended, pending internal review. Damon's profile disappeared from the company website. And Jared? He texted again that evening. Bro, I think we should talk before this gets worse. I looked at the message for a while, then deleted it. Because the thing about betrayal is, it doesn't end when you expose it. It ends when you stop explaining yourself to the people who started it. Still, I wasn't finished. There was one more step, one final thing to make sure she understood what it meant to lose everything she'd gambled with. And it was already set in motion. By Monday morning, the dominoes had started to fall faster than I'd expected. The Hilton had officially forwarded copies of the invoice to both corporate accounts, Harper's Charity Foundation and Damon's event management firm. The charges were itemized: luxury suite, champagne package, catering, spa add-ons, and private room service. Nothing in the list was illegal, but every item screamed scandal when placed under the heading corporate expense claim. At 9:42 a.m., Harper called. I didn't answer. At 9:45, she texted, "Please, we need to talk. It's serious." At 10:01, a screenshot appeared, the invoice itself. Her message beneath it said, "They're saying this came from my account. Tell them it's a mistake." I didn't respond. She'd spent weeks telling me I was imagining things, convincing herself she could build an empire on lies. Now she wanted me to fix the paperwork she'd used to hide them. By noon, the story had spread. Damon's company released a statement about an internal matter involving misuse of funds. Harper's charity board quietly scrubbed her name from their website. And then came the final blow, the Hilton's PR division. They released their own statement claiming that an employee and a contractor had misrepresented private use of a corporate suite as an official event booking. The photo they used in the press release wasn't explicit, but it showed the suite table, champagne glasses, rose petals, and Harper's recognizable beige coat draped over a chair. The caption under the leaked email thread read, "Guest, Harper Lindell. Event Director, D. Carson." Within hours, the sponsor started pulling out. I watched it unfold from the quiet of my apartment, laptop open, phone buzzing constantly. The same people who'd praised Harper for her professionalism were now tweeting about ethical boundaries. Her name became a headline, then a footnote. But it wasn't satisfaction I felt. Not triumph, not revenge. Just the slow, steady realization that I'd finally reached the end of something that had been decaying long before I saw it. That evening, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, Harper stood there. No makeup, hair tied up, wearing the same coat from that night at the Hilton, the one that had now become infamous. Her eyes were red, not from tears but exhaustion. She asked if she could come in. I stepped aside. She didn't sit down. She just stood in the living room, looking at everything: the empty coffee table, the turned-off TV, the photo of us still sitting on the shelf. Then she said quietly that her board had suspended her without pay, that Damon had been fired, and that someone leaked the files. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, waiting. Finally, she said the words I'd been expecting. "Was it you?" I told her the truth, that I hadn't leaked anything, that all I did was forward the hotel's billing emails to the compliance offices that were already entitled to them. Everything else spread on its own. She tried to argue that I'd set her up, that I'd sabotaged her career out of spite. I didn't raise my voice. I just reminded her of the night outside the Hilton, the line Damon had said, the one she'd laughed at. "She told me you'd be asleep." That shut her down. She lowered her gaze, her voice trembling when she said she never meant to hurt me, that it just happened. The kind of excuse people use when they still think betrayal is an accident. Then she asked something that caught me off guard. She asked if I could at least help her clear it up. If I could talk to someone at the Hilton, say it was all misunderstood. I almost laughed. After everything, the lies, the manipulation, the years of pretending, she still believed I'd cover for her. I told her she should start by returning the ring she'd left on the kitchen counter. She stared at me for a long time, then finally placed it on the table. Her hand lingered over it, trembling. She said quietly, "You think this will make you feel better?" Watching me fall. I told her it wasn't about watching anything. It was about finally not being the only one in the dark. She left without another word. The sound of the door closing echoed through the apartment like a period on a sentence that had taken years to write. I thought that would be the end of it. But the story didn't fade, it grew. 2 days later, Jared called me from an unknown number. His voice was strained, angry, defensive. He said Harper had told him I'd ruined everything, that if I didn't fix it, she was going to tell people I'd blackmailed her. That was the moment I realized they were still playing the same game, even after losing the board, the jobs, the reputation. still trying to twist the story one last time. I let him finish, then said simply, "Jared, check your company inbox." He went quiet, then hung up. I knew why. I'd sent the same invoice to his firm that morning, because the financial audit trail showed he'd transferred funds to Harper's charity account 2 weeks before the suite booking. I didn't need to say a word. His signature spoke for itself. The next day, I received a message from Hilton Corporate's legal team thanking me for my cooperation and confirming the investigation was closed. They refunded my deposit for the suite and added a note of apology for the inconvenience caused during the billing reconciliation. That refund was the cleanest victory I'd ever seen. After that, I stopped checking the news. Harper moved out of her apartment. Damon left the city. Jared deleted all his social media. The headlines moved on to new scandals, and their names disappeared beneath fresher gossip. For me, life became strangely quiet. I sold the engagement ring and used the money to book a solo trip, not out of celebration, but because I needed to see something new. Somewhere that wasn't tied to the smell of hotel carpet or the sound of late-night excuses. I didn't tell anyone where I went. I just drove west until the roads turned to coastline. One evening, I stopped at a diner overlooking the water. The waitress brought me coffee, and in the reflection of the window, I saw my own face. Not angry, not broken, just older. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for a call, a lie, or a confrontation. Just the sound of waves and the faint hum of passing traffic. That night, I opened my phone for the first time in days. There was one unread email in my inbox, from Harper. The subject line said, "You won." I didn't open it. I deleted it, closed the phone, and watched the ocean swallow the last of the light. Because it wasn't about winning. It never was. It was about finally letting the truth exist on its own. No lies, no cover stories, no rehearsed apologies. The world had handled the rest. And somewhere, miles away from the Hilton, from Jared, from all of it, I finally slept.